It's been a very, very important week in the commemoration and the remembrance of the survivors of World War II as well as the Holocaust. And as the world marks 75 years since the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau death camps, where more than 1 million people perished during the Holocaust, survivors are providing their moving testimonies about their experiences there and during the time during the Holocaust. More than 1.1 million people, mainly Jewish people, perished at Auschwitz-Birkenau, the Nazi death camp in Poland, even in gas chambers or from starvation and disease. Joining us live in studio is Miriam Lichterman. She was born in Warsaw, Poland, where she went to school until the outbreak of war in September 1913. During the war, she was 1939. My apologies. During the war, she was moved into the Warsaw Ghetto and from there to various concentration camps. She was imprisoned in Majdanek, in Birkenau, Auschwitz, Ravensbrück and Malhof, and she was on the infamous Death March. Liberated in May 1945, she moved to Brussels and then to London. She arrived in South Africa in 1948, where she married her husband, Cantor Jacob Lichterman, who himself was a survivor of World War II and the Holocaust. He passed away in 1986. Miriam, who joins us in studio, has 2 sons. She has 5 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren, leaving a legacy after, what could be, what I can describe as unimaginable circumstances during your young life. Miriam, thanks so much for coming into studio with us.
It's a privilege to be able to tell you a little bit. 75
years after the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. I am quite fascinated with particularly World War II history, with issues regarding the story of survivors of the Holocaust. And I appreciate the testimonies and the stories of people who lived during that period. But I want to start with you let's start before the outbreak of war, living in Warsaw in Poland. Tell me a little bit about your childhood, your background.
Well, in Warsaw, the general population was about 2.5 million. Of that, 350,000 were Jews. There were many Jewish schools, concerts. The Jewish life was very, very, on a very high cultural and educational level. We enjoyed the freedom of attending schools, attending services, attending synagogues, attending concerts. There was no discrimination, and we lived where non-Jewish people lived. There was no discrimination. You lived where you could afford to live, and you went to school which were nearer to you. You went to a private high school, which was, of course, mainly for Jewish children, went to Jewish private high schools, but you could attend government schools. We enjoyed every kind of freedom that any other person in Poland, in Warsaw, which was the capital, enjoyed.
We are living in a modern world where the shoutings of populism is growing ever louder. We still have anti-Semitism, particularly from many quarters in this modern world. Just take me through being a young person in Warsaw, Poland, and starting to hear the loudening rumbles of anti-Jewish settlement, anti-Semitism growing up, and you hear something similar in our modern politic, in our growing populism that we're experiencing today in the modern world?
First of all, there are no similarities. You can't make comparisons because each town, each country has its own general atmosphere. The population is different, and you can't generalize. After my liberation, I thought naively that there will be no more wars, no more anti-Semitism, no more hatred of one people towards the others. I thought humanity has learned the lesson. Unfortunately, nowadays, when I look around me, I see what's going on in some countries or near us. I am a little bit disillusioned, perhaps, but still it is a different world, and we do enjoy the freedom to be who we are.
As people, primarily Jewish people in the ghettos in Poland, in Warsaw, were being rounded up, taken up onto trucks and then later onto trains. Was there an awareness that you were going to a place where the vast majority would not come out alive? Was there an awareness that people being transported from the ghettos to these camps would not come back alive?
At the beginning, we were told, we naively believed that people were going to work camps. But a few men managed to escape from Auschwitz, where they were sorting the clothes of the victims. The clothes used to be sorted and put into bundles and sent back to Germany because they needed the clothes there. Germany was being bombed at the time by the Allies. And it was only when two men who had been neighbors of ours managed to escape from such a transport where they were sorting the clothes. And they had nowhere to go, so they made their way back to the ghetto. And they alerted the people, and they told us, there are no work camps, there are destruction camps, gas chambers. At the beginning, we didn't believe them.
I've been reading lots about the commemoration and the memorialization of Auschwitz this week. One is a man who had been on a tour of what is now essentially a museum, Auschwitz, and there's a pile of spectacles. And one of the comments from someone, a tourist to another man, said, "These spectacles look like yours," and it just brought to my attention that these are people. This is humanity that went through there. So when people see these connections between each other, what I've always wanted to know was, did people who were imprisoned in these death camps, did you try to make that human connection with the guard or the German or whoever was your captor, to look them in the eye and ask, why are you doing this? Am I not human like you?
You were not able to make a personal connection with your German guard. You couldn't ask such a question because there was no answer. The answer might have been a knock over your head, you couldn't ask a guard such a question.
How do you retain...
You were not in a position to ask questions. Your mind was focused on surviving another few hours. And the biggest problem, immediate problem, was whether the piece of bread you received during appel at 6 o'clock in the evening after work, whether eat just a little piece of it and leave the rest for tomorrow morning, because you only got your bread in the evening after a day's labor.
Miriam, how old were you when you were in the camps?
You know, I have to think how old I was.
Well,
I would have gone, I was a teenager.
Okay.
On the 1st of September, which is the beginning of the academic year in Warsaw, in Europe, I would have gone into matric year.
So you're probably around 17, 18 at that time.
No, I was 16.
You were 16. You were now on the other side of 90 years old. As you're saying, living essentially for the next hours, trying to survive over the next few hours. How do you even look for hope? How do you even think about the future? When you were 16 years old in a death camp in Auschwitz, did you ever see yourself living to 20, 40, 50, now on the other side of 90, when all you're doing is living for the next few hours?
You know, the biggest effort went into living through a day of hard work, not collapsing before you got your portion of bread when you were standing on a pell, and how to avoid during a selection not being taken out from the group and sent aside for the death chambers.
We are speaking to Miriam Lichterman. She is a survivor of the Holocaust. She is a survivor of Auschwitz, and with 75 years after the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, we are looking back, we are getting testimony from Miriam about her particular story. I'm very fascinated about that concept, Miriam, of keeping yourself small, keeping yourself unseen. How do you not get selected? How are you not the next person to be taken to a chamber under the guise of having a shower and not returning? How do you keep yourself almost invisible? How did you do that?
You didn't do anything. Life just dragged you along. There was no special effort one could make when there was a selection. And Mengele, who was a doctor originally, you were just concentrating on the movement of his button during a selection. If he waved your button left, then you were still all right for a time. But if he waved his baton the other way, then you just went to the barrack from which you went to the gas chambers. And I must tell you, and I am saying it in all sincerities, then at the time and even today, I believe in miracles. And I want you all to believe in miracles. Because I was left for the gas chambers. I was a skeleton at the time. But because of my luck, obviously, I was meant to live. We were not sent straight to the barrack from which one only went to the gas chambers. We still went to our own barrack.
Do you resign yourself to the fact that you may not see the next day? Is that how you live your life, with a resignation, with zero hope that the war may come to an end, that people may be liberated as you eventually were?
You know, when we dared hope, when we did dare to hope, it was not at a time when one was during a selection marching past Mengele naked, and he moves his baton left or right. When we did hope, it was if somehow, through some unexclosed way, somebody sent us a message that the Russian troops are near, or this is happening, or that is happening, actually outside the camps. But one still thought, will I last so long still?
You've undoubtedly seen probably the worst of humanity, and
yes,
one would ultimately forgive you for not having trust in any form of humanity since then.
No.
But how have you not been able to do that? How do you continue life without having distrust and inhumanity, of having the utmost, contempt and regard for not necessarily just Germans of their time, but for all humans, because a human perpetrated this against, ultimately your friends and your family, people who did not survive.
In spite of my terrible experiences, and in spite of the terrible losses that I suffered, I did not become a bitter person. I still believe, because my survival is nothing short of a miracle.
To bring it back home to South Africa, currently we still grapple with the concept of forgiveness, reconciliation and forgiveness post-1994. Where does your heart lie when it talks about forgiveness, particularly of perpetrators of the Holocaust?
My feelings, I wouldn't classify forgive or not forgive. There is a lot in between. I am grateful for the miracle of my survival. I believe there was some divine presence watching over me. In spite of my experiences, I did not become better. I have said it before. I have not become resentful. I prefer to dwell on the goodness of humanity. I know I have experienced that in the middle of hell, there were some good people.
And I think that's where we leave it. Miriam, thanks so much. Miriam Lichterman, survivor of the Holocaust, survivor of Auschwitz-Birkenau, as this week the world commemorates 75 years after the liberation of Auschwitz. 1.1 million people perishing there during World War II. Miriam is still surrounded by her 2 sons, 5 grandchildren, 7 great-grandchildren, and her legacy not only lies there, but also in her ability to remind us of these stories and to remind the world of the stories. And Miriam, I want to say thank you so much for coming into our studio and not allowing us to forget.
Absolutely. Don't forget, but remain human. And in any situation in life where you are on a crossroad between human and inhuman, choose humanity. Remain human in any situation. Thank you.
Miriam Lichterman there. Powerful testimony, a powerful story. Survivor of Auschwitz, survivor of the Holocaust. Moved to South Africa in 1948. And I can say I am greatly privileged to hear the story firsthand. Miriam, one more time, thank you very much
for
sharing your story.